X. Are you sure you don't need anyone with you, ma'am? The man at the front desk had asked it quietly, like he already knew the answer. Vera Okafor just looked at him, looked at the stack of papers in his hand, looked at the number at the bottom of the top page. Then she looked back at him. I'm fine, she said. She was not fine. X. She had been many things in her life. A corporal in the Canadian Army. A woman who had done 2 tours in places she still didn't talk about at dinner. A daughter, a mechanic, a person who had learned to sleep with one eye open in tents and transports and field stations from Kandahar to Djibouti. Fine was not usually a word that applied to her, but she said it because that was what you said, and because the alternative was explaining everything, and she did not have time for that. X. She had 60 days. X. The garage had been her mother's before it became hers. Miriam Okafor had opened it in Sudbury, Ontario in 1994 with a leased bay, a second-hand lift, and a hand-lettered sign her brother painted on a Saturday afternoon. Okafor's Auto. Simple. Her brother had offered to add something underneath, reliable service, family-owned, but Miriam had shaken her head. The name is enough, she said. People will know. And they did, for a long time. X. Miriam was the kind of mechanic who remembered not just your car but your kids' names and what grade they were in, and whether the noise you were describing was a wheel bearing or just ice buildup behind the panel. She knew the difference, and she told you straight, and she never charged you for something you didn't need. That reputation kept the garage alive for almost 25 years. X. Then the chain opened on Regent Street South, and things got quiet, and Miriam's heart started giving her trouble, and by the time Vera came home from her second tour, with an honorable discharge and a left knee that never healed right, the books were already bleeding. X. Miriam passed in November, 2 years ago. She left Vera the garage, the lease on the building, the tools, and a balance sheet that Vera read 4 times before she accepted what it was telling her. She was 14 months behind on the commercial lease. She owed 2 suppliers. The property assessor had come by in September, and the number he'd put on paper was the number that the man at the front desk had shown her this morning. 60 days. After that, the building reverted to the landlord. X. The sign would come down. Her mother's name would come off the door. X. Vera was 29 years old. She had a grade 10 education and a college trade certificate, and 8 years of military experience that had taught her how to fix engines under fire, in the dark, in the mud, in temperatures that cracked your tools if you left them on the ground. She had rebuilt a Land Rover transmission by feel in a bunker, with no lights and mortar rounds landing a quarter-mile out. X. She had done things with a wrench and a wire and a piece of field-stripped equipment that her instructors back in Borden said weren't supposed to be possible. She was, by any reasonable measure, one of the best vehicle mechanics in this city. What she was not was wealthy, and what she was not was okay. X. There was a letter from Georgian College on the kitchen table at home. It had been there for 6 weeks. It was an acceptance into the Mechanical Engineering Technology program, a 2-year diploma with co-op placement, the kind of paper that could change what doors opened for her. There was also, in a drawer in the kitchen, a deferral notice. She had already pushed the start date back once. The college had granted it, but the letter in the drawer was clear. Second and final deferral. X. You start in January or the seat is gone. X. January was 10 weeks away. She had no money for tuition, no time to find it, and a garage that needed her every single day just to stay open. X. Every morning she unlocked the bay doors at 7. Every morning she made a coffee in the small room at the back, poured half of it into a thermos for herself, and left the rest in the pot, because that was what her mother had always done, in case somebody came in cold. She fed the neighbor's cat that had started sleeping on the hood of the parts car out back. She pulled the first vehicle onto the lift and got to work. X. By November in Sudbury, the light was already gone before 4 in the afternoon. She worked by the shop lights and the overhead fluorescents and the dented headlamp she'd brought back from her second tour, the one with the crack in the casing that you had to hold at exactly the right angle. She worked until she couldn't see straight, then locked up and walked home through the dark and the cold and lay in bed listening to the heat creak through the baseboards, thinking about her mother. X. That was the life. That was every day. X. The Friday it happened, the sky had been dropping freezing rain since noon, and the roads in Sudbury were the kind of dangerous that makes the local radio interrupt its programming every 20 minutes. Vera had sent her one part-time employee home at 3. She was alone in the bay, draining the coolant system on a 2007 Silverado that belonged to a man named Bertrand, who had been her mother's customer since the 90s, when she heard the engine. She heard it before she saw it, a cough, a labored, rattling cough, the kind of sound that tells you a vehicle is trying very hard to die. She stepped out from under the bay door into the freezing rain and saw the truck. It was a 1972 Ford F-100, forest green, with a custom flatbed and a toolbox mounted across the rear. Beautiful, even disabled, the kind of truck you don't see outside of shows anymore. It was limping up the service road on its last breath, the engine misfiring so badly the whole body shuddered with it. The driver coaxed it into her lot and cut the ignition before it could do worse to itself. The door opened. A man got out. He was 70, maybe a little past it, broad across the shoulders but carrying his weight carefully now, the way old men do when they've had the wrong kind of wear put on a joint. Work jacket, heavy canvas, patches on the sleeves. Not decorative. Worn. He moved to the front of the truck with a hand on the hood like he was checking whether it was breathing. Vera came out. You need a hand. The man looked up. His face was the kind of weathered that comes from decades of outside work in a northern climate. Not soft, not unkind, just worn down to the truth of itself. He took off his hat when he spoke to her. That was the first thing she noticed. Ma'am, I'm sorry to pull in uninvited. Name's Earl Tremaine. I was trying to make it to the shop on Regent, but she gave out before I got there. The shop on Regent, Vera thought. The chain. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. She'd sent 3 trucks there last month that came back to her 2 weeks later, still wrong. She didn't say that. Let's get it inside before the freezing rain gets into anything worse, she said. They rolled the F-100 into the bay. Earl Tremaine moved slowly, but he pulled his weight. She didn't have to ask him twice for anything. He knew vehicles. She could tell by the way he watched her hands, the way he nodded at what she did without her having to explain it. He sat down on the old wooden stool in the corner, the one her mother had kept there for the same reason, so people had somewhere to be while they waited. She crouched by the engine and started checking. She came out from underneath 3 minutes later. Her face was careful. Mr. Tremaine, I'm going to be straight with you. The head gasket is blown. One of your injectors is completely seized. Your cooling system has a breach somewhere, which is why she was running hot, and your timing chain has been skipping for a while by the look of the wear pattern. Earl looked at the truck. His jaw set the way a man's jaw sets when he's absorbing something he was already afraid of. Can you fix it? Not tonight, she said. The injector alone, that's a specific part for a 72 F-100, and I don't have it in stock. Nobody in Sudbury has it in stock. The roads are about to close. Earl was quiet for a moment. He reached into his jacket pocket and brought out a folded paper. He unfolded it on his knee without looking down at it, like he already knew every line. I need to be in Chaplow by tomorrow morning, he said. 7 a.m. That's when they're starting the memorial. Vera waited. My younger brother Robert. He worked his whole life as a CN rail inspector. The bridge on the Nemegos subdivision, the one they're naming tomorrow, he's the one who found the fault in 1987 that would have taken the whole thing down. They never told anyone at the time. Just fixed it and moved on. He died in April. His daughter found out about the citation in his records. She fought for 2 years to get the naming approved. Earl refolded the paper. He smoothed it flat on his knee. Robert always wanted me there for things. For everything. I missed our father's funeral. I was up north, working a remote site, no signal. By the time I got word it was done, I told Robert that day I would never miss anything again. He held me to that for 30 years. I do not intend to break it tomorrow for the first time with him gone. The freezing rain hit the roof of the bay in sheets. The temperature outside had dropped another 3 degrees in the last hour. Vera looked at Earl. She looked at the F-100. She looked at the back wall of the shop, where her father's tools still hung on the pegboard the way her mother had always kept them, after he left. Because some things you keep the way they were, not because it makes sense, but because you can't bring yourself to change them. Her mother's voice came up in her head, clear and simple the way it always was when Vera was trying to make a complicated decision. If it's the right thing to do, the cost doesn't come into it, baby. It just doesn't. Vera stood up. She said, Mr. Tremaine, the part you need doesn't exist in this city tonight, so we're not going to use a part. Earl looked at her. X, go sit down. I'll put on coffee. X, now. Here is where I have to pause, because I want you to understand what happened in that garage over the next 9 hours, and I want you to understand it right. X, Vera Okafor had no reason to do what she did. She had a garage on the edge of losing everything. She had a knee that ached in the cold and a back that had been taking the wrong kind of weight since she was 21 years old in Kandahar. She had a deferral letter in a drawer at home, and 60 days before, her mother's name came off a door she couldn't afford to keep. She had every reason to say, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't help you tonight." She did not say that. 6:14 p.m. She pulled the engine apart and laid the components out on the bench in the order her mother had taught her, every bolt in a separate section, every gasket labeled in grease pencil, on a strip of masking tape. Earl watched from the stool. He didn't speak. He had the quality of a man who had learned that the way to help an expert is to stay out of their way. 7:30 p.m. Injector confirmed dead. No replacement in any local inventory. Vera went to the shelf along the back wall where her mother kept the recovery box. Parts pulled clean from trade-ins and write-offs over the years. Things Miriam couldn't bring herself to throw away, because there was still life in them if you knew where to look. She found a fuel injector from a 1974 Jeep Wagoneer. Different application, but close. The body diameter was almost right. If she could machine down the tip and re-drill the spray pattern, she could. She had her father's metal lathe at the back of the shop, older than she was, still accurate to within 1/1000th of an inch because Miriam had kept it calibrated the way some people keep a good knife sharp. 8:45 p.m. The power flickered, then it held, then at 9:02 it went out completely. Earl started to stand. She waved him down. She lit the kerosene lantern off the hook by the back door, the same one her mother had kept filled, and ready for exactly this reason. Because in Sudbury you did not count on the grid staying up in an ice storm. She clamped the dented military headlamp she'd carried back from overseas to the engine stand and set the angle until the light was right. Then she went back to the lathe. The injector modification took 2 hours. Her hands were steady and her breathing was slow, and she worked the way she worked in the field. Not fast, not performing, just precise. One correct movement at a time. Earl watched without speaking. At some point he stood up and found the coffee pot and poured 2 cups and set one beside her without asking. She took it without looking up. 11:20 p.m. head gasket. No replacement existed for a 72 F100 anywhere in this province at this hour. She found a sheet of compressed copper gasket stock in the back of the recovery shelf. The right thickness, not the right shape. She took a scribe and the original gasket as a template, scored the outline by lantern light, cut it with aviation snips, annealed the edge with a torch, trimmed it clean. The finished piece was as accurate as anything you'd order from a supplier. More accurate, maybe, because she had cut it herself. Earl watched her work. He had not moved from the stool in 2 hours. At midnight he spoke. "How long have you been doing this?" Vera didn't look up. "Since I was 8. My mother taught me." Silence. "Were you overseas?" She paused. 2 tours, Army vehicle tech. Another silence. Robert was in the reserves, Earl said, never deployed, but he had a kind of focus. When he decided something mattered, nothing moved him. He looked at his hands. "You remind me of him." Vera didn't say anything, but something in her chest shifted, small and quiet, the way things do when you have been alone in a grief, and then someone without knowing it sets a hand near the edge of it. 1:47 a.m. She began reassembly. The modified injector seated clean. The copper gasket seated clean. She torqued the head bolts in sequence, 3 passes, the way you had to, the way her mother had written it in the spiral notebook she kept on the bench because she said if it's worth knowing, it's worth writing down. Vera had memorized that notebook years ago. She still checked it sometimes, not because she needed to, but because her mother's handwriting was in it. 3:10 a.m., final check. She bled the cooling line, set the timing, brought everything to ready. She stepped back. Her jacket was soaked through. Her knee was locked up and complaining. She straightened it slowly, the way she'd learned to do. She said, "Mr. Tremaine, you want to try her?" Earl stood up from the stool. He was stiff, 9 hours on that wood. He moved to the driver's door, got in, sat quiet for a moment with his hands on the wheel. Then he turned the key. Click. Nothing. Vera didn't move. She checked the connection at the distributor, adjusted the timing by half a degree. One more time, she said. Earl turned the key. The F-100 started like it was 1972 again. Not a cough, not a sputter. A clean, deep idle, the kind that resonates in your sternum and fills the whole bay with sound. Earl bowed his head over the steering wheel. His shoulders moved. He didn't make any noise for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were red. He climbed out of the truck carefully. He put out his hand and Vera shook it. She'll hold the road to Chaplow, she said. You'll want a proper injector replacement within a few thousand kilometers. The copper gasket will seat fully by 50 miles. Don't push her above 4,000 RPM until she's fully warm. He nodded. How much? Parts and labor, the injector modification and the gasket stock, $40. Call it an hour of diagnostics, $60, $100 even. Earl looked at her for a long time. I'd have paid $1,000 and thought I'd come out ahead, he said. Then let me give you an honest bill, Vera said. My mother always said the price and the work have to match each other. $100 is what matched. He reached into his wallet. He counted out the bills slowly and set them on the bench. Then he stood looking at the garage around him, at the tools on the pegboard and the recovery shelf and the kerosene lantern still burning on the hook. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small worn card. On the front, just a name, Earl Tremaine, and a Chaplow exchange number written in pencil. On the back, in the same pencil, Tremaine & Sons, Registered Heritage Ironwork, Est, 1969. You call that number if you need anything you can't find, he said. I know every salvage yard and private collection from here to Timmins. If the part exists, I'll find it. He limped back to the F-100. The engine fired on the first turn. He rolled out into the breaking ice storm, the taillights going red up the service road and then gone. Vera stood in the doorway for a minute. The freezing rain had thinned to something softer. She locked up, turned off the lanterns, went home. She didn't find it until the next morning. She was doing her walkthrough of the bay before opening when her boot caught something under the edge of the workbench. A canvas roll, the kind you keep hand tools in. Heavy. She picked it up, unrolled it on the bench. Inside, a set of vintage snap-on combination wrenches, a full set, sizes running from 1/4 inch to 1 1/4 inch, chrome vanadium, the American-made kind from before 1980 that you could not replace at any price today. Each one engraved on the handle with initials, RT. Earl had left them behind. She held one in her hand. It had the weight of something used for 50 years by someone who knew how to use it. She thought about calling the number on the card. She almost did. Then she thought, he knows he left them. If he had wanted them back, he would not have left them. She set them out on the bench in order. She didn't put them away. They stayed there all that day, and the next, and eventually she understood she wasn't going to put them away at all. 3 weeks later, the knock came at the bay door on a Tuesday afternoon. She opened it expecting a customer. It was Earl. He was not alone. With him was a woman about 60, well-dressed but practical about it. The kind of dressed up that says I have somewhere important to be, not I want you to notice me. Behind her, 2 men Vera recognized by build and bearing as tradesmen before she knew anything else about them. Behind them, 4 more in a loose group, talking quietly. Earl introduced the woman. This is Patricia Nowell. Vera felt the name land somewhere in her memory, chair of the Northern Ontario Trades Heritage Foundation. The woman stepped forward and shook Vera's hand. I've heard the story, she said. All of it. From Earl and from his daughter, who was at the bridge ceremony in Chaplow, and who noticed something about the way Earl talked about this garage. Vera waited. I want to ask you to come inside, Patricia Nowell said. There are some things we'd like to put on your table, if you'll allow it. There are things in life you prepare for and things that come at you sideways in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon in November when you are still wearing a greasy jacket and your knee is giving you trouble. Vera sat at the small table in the back room of the garage and watched Patricia Nowell open a leather folder and set 3 documents flat on the table, one at a time, like she was being careful not to tip anything. The first document was a deed. Vera's name was on it. The building on Frood Road, not leased anymore. Bought, paid in full, back arrears included, by a private trust administered by the Northern Ontario Trades Heritage Foundation, effective the previous Friday. The number at the bottom was more money than Vera's mother had made in 10 years. Vera put her hand flat on the table. I can't accept this, she said. Patricia Noel looked at her steadily. The foundation has been looking for a restoration and training facility in Northern Ontario for 4 years. We have the funding. We have the mandate. What we have not had is the right place, with the right person. She nodded at the bay. Your mother ran this garage for 25 years. You kept it running after she died, on your own, without asking anyone for help. We're not giving you charity, Ms. Okafor. We're making an investment. Vera's throat was tight. The second document was a proposal. The foundation would fund a full renovation of the garage, a heritage vehicle restoration center, 2 additional bays, a proper parts archive, a community apprenticeship program for youth in the region. The name on the proposal, on every page, was the name that would go on the building, Miriam Okafor Heritage Garage. Vera looked at her mother's tools on the pegboard, the spiral notebook on the bench, the wrenches in order on the worktop, RT engraved on everyone. The third document was a letter from Georgian College. She looked up at Patricia Noel. I spoke with the program coordinator, Patricia said. The deferral has been canceled and replaced with a full bursary, tuition, fees, materials for both years, plus a co-op placement at the Foundation's restoration facility in Sault Ste. Marie starting in your 2nd year. You start in January. Vera sat for a long time without speaking. She said, Earl didn't know about Georgian College. He did not, Patricia said. Earl called me because of what happened in this garage. Georgian College is something we identified separately because it's what you were working toward, and because it's exactly the kind of credential this facility needs its director to have. Director. The word landed softly and stayed. You'll run the garage, Patricia said. You'll oversee the apprenticeship program. You'll go to school in the evenings, and the foundation will work around your schedule. We are not asking you to give anything up. We are asking you to do what you were already doing, with support. Vera was quiet for another long moment. She thought about her mother making coffee and leaving half in the pot for whoever came in cold. She thought about the tools on the pegboard and the notebook with the handwriting in it. She thought about a man named Robert Tremaine and a bridge on a subdivision line that was still standing because he had paid attention, and how nobody had known about it for 35 years, and how the right thing done quietly can take a very long time to be seen. She said yes. Earl stood up from his chair in the corner. He crossed the room and held out his hand again. She shook it again, the same way as before, firm, straightforward, no excess. He said, Your mother would know what to do with all of this. I know, Vera said. She'd put on coffee. The renovation took 4 months. The garage closed for 8 weeks, the shortest shutdown Vera could negotiate, and she spent most of those weeks in Sault Ste. Marie doing the co-op, coming home on weekends to check on the work. Earl's son drove up from Chapleau twice to help with the ironwork on the new signage. He didn't charge for his time. He said it was what his father would have wanted, and that was the end of the discussion. The new sign went up on a Thursday evening in early spring, when the light was just starting to last past 5 again and the snow was going soft at the edges. Miriam Okafor Heritage Garage. Ironwork letters, hand-forged, the kind that would outlast the building they were mounted on. Patricia Noel came for the opening. So did Earl. So did 7 apprentices from the first cohort of the program, young people from Sudbury and Gogama and Lively, 2 of them barely 18. One of them, a woman who reminded Vera of herself at that age in a way that made her chest ache. She gave her the same speech her mother had given her on her first day in the bay. Watch what the hands are doing. The noise tells you what's wrong. The hands tell you how to fix it. Georgian College sent a representative. The mayor came by and shook hands and stood for photographs and said things that were true and also a little hollow, the way political things are. The local paper ran a story. The story got picked up. The photograph ran in 3 papers. Vera standing in the doorway of the new garage in her work jacket with the foundation plaque behind her and the hand-forged letters above the door. Earl was in the photograph too, standing a little to the left, hat off the way he always took it off. 6 months after the opening, the first apprentice cohort completed their initial certification. Vera had taught most of the sessions herself, in the evenings after her college courses, working from her mother's spiral notebook and from the notes she had kept from her own training in Borden, which turned out to be more complimentary than she'd expected. Theory and field, book in hand, her mother's way and the Army's way. She taught them both. One evening in November, almost exactly a year from the night with the F-100, Vera was alone in the garage doing a close on the last bay when she heard a sound outside. She went to the side door. Standing on the step was a boy, 15 or 16, in a jacket too thin for the weather. He had a bicycle wheel in his hand. Not a bicycle, just the wheel, stripped off, buckled badly, the kind of damage that happens when a car clips you and doesn't stop. His lip was split. He was trying not to cry and mostly managing it. She opened the door wider. Come in out of the cold. He explained in short, tight sentences. The car hadn't stopped. He'd walked the wheel 3 blocks. He didn't have money. He didn't know where else to go. Vera took the wheel. She looked at the buckle. She trued it by hand in 7 minutes, used 2 spare spokes from the parts shelf, checked the tension on everything. The boy watched her work without speaking, the way Earl had watched her, the way her mother's customers had always watched her mother, with the particular quiet of someone watching an expert who is not performing expertise, just doing the thing. She handed the wheel back. He reached into his jacket pocket and held out some change, $4 and some coins. She shook her head. Keep it. But, listen, she said. One day someone near you is going to need something, and you're going to have a choice to help them or walk past. You make the right choice. That's what you owe me. He looked at her. He nodded once. He left into the cold and the dark. Vera locked the bay door and stood for a moment by the entrance, where the original tools from Okafor's auto were mounted now in a shadow box on the wall. Her mother's first wrench set, the dented military headlamp, the spiral notebook behind glass. A small plaque below read, "This is where it started. It is still starting." She turned off the lights. She put on her jacket. She went home through the dark and the cold and the snow coming soft off the birches. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't think about the balance sheet or the lease or the letter in the drawer. She thought about her mother leaving coffee in the pot for whoever came in cold. She thought about how long a thing can travel before it finds the person it was meant to find. She thought, I see it now, Mom. I finally see it. I keep thinking about that canvas tool roll, the one Earl left under the workbench. RT engraved on every handle, 50 years of use in every one of them. He didn't forget them. I think we both know that. What stays with me about Vera's story isn't the part that ends well, the sign going up, the scholarship, the foundation, all of it. Those things are real, and they matter, but they're not where the story lives for me. The story lives in that moment at 3:10 in the morning when she stepped back from an engine she had rebuilt by lantern light with parts that weren't supposed to fit after 9 hours on a knee that was already giving out and said, "Mr. Tremaine, you want to try her?" She didn't know anything was coming. She didn't fix that engine because she thought something good would happen afterward. She fixed it because Earl needed to be in Chaplow by sunrise. And because her mother had taught her that the price and the work have to match each other, and because some things you do not walk away from when you have the skill to help and the person in front of you is asking. That's the part I think about, not the reward, the decision made quietly in the cold with no one watching. There's something I've come to believe about how a life actually gets built, and it's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's the accumulation of choices made when nobody's keeping score. Choices that come out of who you actually are, not who you're trying to appear to be. Vera had the technical knowledge to do what she did. She had the discipline, forged over years of Army service and garage floors and early mornings and hard winters, to see it through when her body was telling her to stop. But neither of those things would have mattered if she hadn't been the kind of person who thought a $100 bill was an honest bill for a night's work on a stranger's truck. All 3 of those things had to be there at once. The skill, the endurance, the character. Take any one of them away and the night ends differently. Miriam Okafor built that in her daughter the same way she built her garage. Not all at once, not with any announcement. Just day after day, leave the coffee in the pot, tell the customer the truth, charge what matches. Vera thought she was just keeping the lights on. She was actually becoming someone. The kind of someone that a man like Earl Tremaine recognizes before he even knows her name. That's the thing about doing the right thing consistently, in the small moments, In the cold and the dark, when it costs you something, it shapes you into a person who does it again and again. And eventually you become someone other people can count on. And that is not a small thing. That is actually everything. The boy with the buckled bicycle wheel. Vera didn't think twice. 7 minutes, 2 spokes, no charge. Just, one day someone near you is going to need help. Make the right choice. That's what you owe me. Miriam's garage. Vera's garage now. Still starting, the plaque says. I think that's right. I think that's exactly right.